Coming from an atheist background, I know there is no one that can tell me there is no God.
These past few years have tested my faith.
A few months ago, I was ready to give up.
I have lost people that were really close to me, as well as being hurt by people I love.
I know the Lord wants me in the missions field for the rest of my life.
God showed me that no matter what is going on in my life, He will never leave our side. I'm never going back. I know that my trust in God will not waver.
I am looking at it as my mission field, and no matter
what happens, I'm going to trust in God. My heart was completely wrecked, and I heard the voice of the Lord speak clearly. God revealed so much to me.
I know that He is making a way for me. I'm going to continue to do the work of my Father in heaven.
I know now that I am armed to do God's work. God shined a light on someone who brought me to Chi Alpha in my life.
My life has been forever changed. Not only do I feel called, but I'm now living in greater sense and awe of God.
I was created for much greater things than I ever thought possible. I will do my part in bringing on the greatest student awakening the world has ever seen.
Our mission is to reconcile students to Christ.
Join us in transforming the university, the marketplace, and the world.
We are Chi Alpha.
So last August was a very, very hot day, and I was on campus at Tulane University, and I went to this thing called Global Cafe. They were serving hot coffee in hot August, and I went and sat down next to a guy I'd never seen before. He was a brand new student from Sweden. He was sweating a lot. His name was Andreas, and he's brand new to New Orleans. He'd come to study as an exchange student at Tulane, and so he'd never been to the States before. Never experienced heat like that before, had no friends, no family, just new. He didn't even know his way around campus. And Andreas, as I got to know him, was also just completely, you might say, lost. When I talked to him later, he's like, what do you most want in the world? And he came up with, well, I want a really pretty wife, a house on the beach, and a fast car, which are all nice things, but leave you rather empty. You can show a picture of him if you want to. My name is Matt DeGear. This is my wife, Jen. And we serve as university missionaries. We're sent to the campus with a group called Chi Alpha, and you all are part of sending us now. And I just want to say thank you. Our full-time job, yeah. So my full-time job is to hang out with people like Andreas. Because of folks like you, not only was I able to be there for an hour at this coffee shop or coffee meeting, but then as we left the building, I realized he had no idea where he was going or what he's doing, and he's just sweating buckets. And so I was able to, you know what? Let's take a tour around the campus. And I was actually very creative. I was like, let's go to the top of the library first, because they created this awesome view. And we can see the whole campus from up there, and it's air-conditioned. Up to the top of the library and just looked around the campus and could see the whole thing, and then was able to just walked him around to see a few of the important things. Now, God just kind of did something unique that day to connect us. And so later that day, I got an invitation from a new Chinese friend I had just met about 4 weeks earlier. And he invited me over to his apartment for something called Hot Pot. Have any of you ever had Hot Pot? Hot Pot. It's just all the rage amongst Chinese young people. It's basically like fondue, but it's Chinese. It's not French. Anyways, he invited me over to his apartment for Hot Pot, and he said, bring some friends. And I was like, well, is anybody else coming? He's like, no, just whoever you bring. Like, well, okay. Now, it's August, and so most of the students are gone. They're gone for the summer. At Tulane, the students are from all over the place. One unique thing about Tulane is they're actually 25% Jewish. So send us to Tulane, you also help reach the people of Israel. But so I was like, okay, who am I going to invite to this random apartment with this guy I barely know? It's like, well, okay, I'll invite one of the other Chinese guys I just met. I'm sure he'll be excited to have Hot Pot. And I'll invite Andreas. He looks like he could use some food. So Andreas came. I found this was the first night I learned this, and I began to see this very, very clearly. Andreas could find free food from miles away. And so he found all the free food there was possible to find. And so he came with me for free dinner. Now, Fonyu, who invited us over, could only find the very spicy hot pot. You throw the spice mix in the boiling water, and then you cook your food in there. They didn't have any of the milder versions. So it was hot. It was hot. Now, they don't eat very spicy food in Scandinavia. Have you ever seen somebody's lips turn purple from heat? I'd never seen it before, but Andreas' lips turned purple, and I think a memory was formed. Now, the morning before the dinner, I was meeting with staff. I don't remember if it was just Tulane staff or if it was Uptown staff. Our Loyola people were there too. But we were praying, and I asked for prayer for that night because earlier in the summer, God had put in my heart to do something different with international students this year. Rather than just kind of doing a Bible discussion group, I wanted to form a small group where we would learn to love one another. It'd be just a different approach. And we called them life groups. And I said, I think tonight is the first meeting of our life group, but those guys don't know it yet. And that's what it was. You can go ahead to the next picture. Remember? Yeah, so this is some of the guys at Christmas. God formed a life group with students from all over the planet. We had Sweden, China, Nigeria, Germany, Spain, Brazil, USA, India, all represented at different parts. And these were some of the guys that were the regulars in the first semester. That's not all of them. Now, I believe that Jesus is the only way to have real, lasting life. He's the only way to abundant life, and he's the only way to know the Father. And I believe that everyone on the entire planet needs to know about Jesus. I also know that there are thousands of people groups who have never yet known the good news about Jesus. And so Jesus gave this thing called the Great Commission. He said, go into all the world and teach them to follow my way of life. Baptize them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And so I would like to just become a world traveler and go to every single place on the planet. But you know that just because I show up doesn't really mean much, because I don't know their language, I don't know their culture, I don't have a passport, I don't have a visa to get into their country. There might be armed conflict going on. There are all kinds of reasons why I can't go everywhere, and you can't go everywhere. But guess what? They're all right here. They are in our backyard. They're on our university campuses. Tulane has 1,400 international students. UNO has hundreds. Loyola has about 150. And a lot of them come from places that are currently unreached or untouched by the gospel. And so I have an opportunity on a day-by-day basis to rub shoulders with, befriend, serve, and share the love of Jesus with students from all over the planet. In our life group, you kind of get a picture of what Chi Alpha is all about. You see the different types of students we want to reach out to. We want to reach out to students like Andreas, or who else is in the picture? Fonyu, from other nations who do not know the name of Jesus. And we get to introduce them to who he is. Andreas and I have continued to communicate since his aunt died in February. He's back. He's actually studying in Denmark. And we Skype once or twice a month and just continuing to investigate who Jesus really is. Fonyu is like that close to following Jesus. Then there's people like Ron. His parents are from Japan, but he grew up in New York. Never knew Jesus. American students who do not know Jesus. We get to love them and introduce them to him while they're at the university. Then you got people like Isaac from Nigeria, passionate about Jesus, shows up on campus, and we get to mobilize him into mission. And now he's taking a step. Next, in the fall, he's going to be leading the life group. And I'm excited to see what God's going to do. Not in the picture, you have folks like Obi. Obi grew up in Baton Rouge. His parents are from Nigeria, but he grew up born and raised in Baton Rouge. He's there right now. He just graduated, studying for the MCAT, looking for a job, and he's going to be sent into the marketplace to make disciples. Because here's our mission in Chi Alpha. We believe that Jesus has called us to reach the entire world. And so we're going to touch university students because they come from the entire world, and we're going to touch them in a place in their life where they're open. They're looking for free food. They're looking for friends. If they're international students, they're just looking for a way around. And so we have just this open door to love them and serve them. And through that, we're going to teach them to follow Jesus with their whole hearts. And we're going to teach them how to lead others to follow Jesus with their whole heart. And through that, we believe God's going to transform the university, the marketplace, and the world. And we can't do it without people like you guys. Just real quickly, who our team is in the city. So I work at Tulane with my wife here. We've been here 15 years. We're transplants from the north. I don't think we're leaving. Then we also have Morgan and Isaac. They're out of training in Springfield, Missouri. They're on their way back. They work with me at Tulane. Joshua Bird is our brand new director at Loyola. He graduated from Loyola 2 years ago. We've been able to mentor him and train him as a student to grow up in his relationship with Christ. And he's been trained as a missionary. He's becoming a full-time director this summer. And then he works with a guy named Justin. And then at UNO, there's Bubba and Christine Johns. They're awesome. You guys need to meet them. And is that our whole team? And then we have an intern coming in to serve with us at Tulane. She just graduated, and she's going to give this first year back full-time to loving Jesus. When you guys give, you help us, because all of these folks have to raise, like, we get to spend it's a privilege. It's a straight-up privilege to spend our full time on campus loving students and leading them to know Jesus. But people, like, we still have to pay our bills. So you all help us do that. You also the Kyle for New Orleans team allow us to, like, pay rent on our storage unit. You allow us to host events where we give folks like Andreas free food. And that free food, we're not a feeding program. Like, these are college students. They have access to food. They're not going to starve to death. So you're not feeding the hungry, but you are allowing us to shake their hand, to get their number, to get their WeChat or their Facebook, and then we can become their friends. And then we can love them. And then when they're in a place of need, we get to be there to show them what the love of God is really all about. We're headed into August. The first several weeks of the school year are where we will feed a lot of people. We'll just spend a whole lot of money to try to be in all kinds of different places to meet the thousands of freshmen who are coming, and most of whom do not know Jesus. And so I thank you, and I encourage you to continue. You are making a difference on the university campus all over the city. We also have groups at Xavier and Delgado. They don't have any full-time staff, but they're still students being discipled to walk in the way of Jesus. Thank you so much for your support, and may God bless you.
Man, how awesome is that? You know, that's one field that many people wouldn't imagine there's a need there, you know? I mean, you're talking about international students who are coming from another country who don't know anything about New Orleans, about how to navigate New Orleans, you know, into a culture that is completely new. And so we need people who have boots on the ground and are ministering to these people and helping reach them for the gospel. And Matt, we can't thank you enough for what you and all your team does, man. You guys are awesome, and we're going to continue supporting you for as long as Church on a Mission is going to be here. It's going to be a long time, buddy, so it's coming. And, man, why don't y'all give him another hand for Tom. Awesome, awesome. Well, week 4, if you got your Bibles, turn to Luke chapter 10. Here we go. Here we go, week 4. This is the conclusion to our week at Be Worship. It's going to be a good one. Luke chapter 10. Man, I'm only going to talk for a little bit. You ain't going to be here long. Y'all ain't been here long, so it's going to be good. Luke chapter 10, verse 25. It says this, "And behold, a lawyer stood up to put him to the test," talking about Jesus, saying, "Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life?" He said to him, "What is written in the law? How do you read it?" And he answered, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself." Does that sound familiar for your week 3? Last week, remember we talked about that a little bit? Verse 28, "And he said to him, you have answered correctly. Do this, and guess what? You're going to live." But the lawyer, desiring to justify himself, said to Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" Jesus replied, Jesus loved telling stories, so he's about to tell a little story. He says, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, the Jew, and he fell among robbers, who stripped him, and they beat him and departed, leaving him half dead. Now by chance, a priest was coming down the road." He's all saved, right? But when he saw him, the priest just walked by on the other side. But then we had a Levite come by. When he came to the place, he saw him, and he passed by on the other side. But then there was a Samaritan. How many of you know that Jews and Samaritans were not supposed to talk to one another, right? They weren't. We learned that a few weeks ago. The Samaritan comes by, and as he journeyed, he came to where he was. And when he saw him, he had what? Look at your neighbor, say compassion. Compassion. He went to him, he bound up his wounds, pouring in oil and wine. Then he set him up on his animal and brought him to a hotel and took care of him. And the next day he took 2 denarii and gave them to the hotel manager, saying, "Take care of him, and whatever more you spend, I will repay you when I come back." Which of these three do you think proved to be a neighbor to the man who fell among the robbers? He said, the one who showed mercy. And Jesus said, you go and do likewise. If you're taking notes, which I hope that you are, you can title this message, Compassion in Action. Compassion in action. It's funny how Jesus starts this with this story, right? He's going to talk, but before he tells this story, he's talking with a lawyer. This lawyer already kind of knows this stuff. You don't think that the lawyer doesn't know what he's asking. He's asking Jesus, well, what's the greatest commandment of all? He's trying to trip Jesus up. He's trying to justify something for himself. And he says, so what's the greatest commandment? Well, Jesus tells him. We learned that last week, right? The highest form of worship is what? Come on, you were here last week. The highest form of worship is what? Obedience, right? It's obedience. And so we learned that Jesus, it wasn't no obedience about following these rules and regulations. Man, that's boring. That's religion. We don't get stuck on that. Jesus came down on this earth and he said, if you love me with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might, you love your neighbor as yourself, then guess what? You're following that greatest commandment. That's what he's trying to teach him. But then you got to love your neighbor as yourself, and that's where the lawyer tries to catch him up. See, the lawyer looks at him and says, his intention was to try to figure out which neighbors he could exclude. Do you ever have enemies that you wish you could exclude from that part, right? We all have enemies or friend enemies, right? And there's this guy, and the lawyer's like, well, the reason he asked this question, look at verse 27, or actually verse 26, right? He said to him, what is it written? Now you read it. He answered this part, and he said, you've answered correctly. Verse 29, he says, desiring to justify himself, he said to Jesus, well, who is my neighbor? See, he's trying to exclude people. He's trying to say there's only got to be a certain type of neighbor, and Jesus is like, man, you got this all wrong. You've got it wrong. And then Jesus goes on to tell this story. He explains this story where you're going to see a guy, a Samaritan, who finds compassion in his heart, and because he has compassion in his heart, he would go on into action by helping this guy, right? He would help this guy in need. You see, the one thing that I realized, remember we talked the highest form of worship is obedience, right? And if you didn't catch that last week, I encourage you to go back and watch that on our website. But the highest form of worship is obedience. If I'm loving the Lord God with all my heart, with all my soul, with all my might, I'm loving my neighbor as myself, then it should naturally, I should love other people, right? Naturally, I should be Christ-like. Naturally, I should be a true worshiper if I'm living that way. It's like the Samaritan. It doesn't even seem like it was a bother for him. It looked like it came naturally to him to help this guy. See, I believe that if we're going to be true worshipers, then compassion has to happen naturally in giving, right? What's cool is that one of the things is that the Bible does. It talks about this generosity, right? That we should give, that we should tithe. And here we go, talking about that money. No, look, let me tell you something. I don't get paid. None of the staff gets paid. Our church doesn't need your money. I'm trying to show you that by following God's example of the highest form of worship is obedience. If I love God with all my heart, with all my soul, with all my might, I love my neighbor as myself, then naturally I should be generous. I should want to make an impact to people, because when you give, guess what? It goes to make a difference. It's like when the boy gave the 5 loaves and the 2 fish I told you about earlier. He takes it, he multiplies it. God multiplies it. But I wanted to tell you first that naturally should happen out of obedience, because God does tell us to give. He does. I mean, if you look all the way from the oldest of time, in the Old Testament, they always practiced giving. They were always giving. Matter of fact, Malachi 3:10 is that kind of command. Look at this in Malachi 3:10 where it says, bring the full tithe. Now, if you break the Hebrew word, you know how a lot of people are like, well, why does these pastors always tell me I got to give 10%? I ain't never read 10% in the Bible before. You ever read 10? Well, matter of fact, if you take that word tithe back to its Hebrew original language, it means a tenth. That's what tithe means. It means a tenth. So he's saying bring the full tenth into the storehouse or the church, right? That there may be food in my house. And therefore, put me to the test, says the Lord of hosts, if I won't open the windows of heaven for you and pour down a blessing until there is no more need. Man, I love to position myself in God's blessing. And what's so cool is that God says, hey, you be obedient and you bring your tithe. Watch the blessings I'm going to do with it. Watch the blessings I'll do in your life and how I'm going to impact other people with it. Man, I will start impacting people till there is no more need. Could you know, there is tons of people in need all over this world, but there's few people who really give. Could you imagine if our whole world gave? There would be no need because blessing would just flow. It would just happen. But that's the first part that we have to take. Is if the highest form of worship is obedience, and I love God with all my heart, with all my soul, with all my might, I love the neighbor like myself, then naturally I should be a giver. I should be generous. It should just flow out of me. And you know, there's a difference between giving and tithing. Did you know that? Did you know there's a difference between giving and tithing? You see, giving is like, well, you know, they probably have to pay for this building or something. Let me throw $50 in there. Let me throw $20 in the offering bucket. Or let me throw $100 in the offering bucket. I'll help them out a little bit. You know, I'll do that. But no. See, that's giving. Tithing is following God's command when he says, give a tenth of it. That's crazy, right? Try to live off 90% of your earnings. A lot of us are so much in debt. Me and my wife, we're in so much student loan debt. It's crazy, you know, from going to college. But it's trusting God. You know, even that we're like that, man, I've seen God do more with our 90 than we could ever do with our 100%. It's crazy what he can do. And it's following in obedience. Now, this is where this is going to tie into our sermon series. All right? So now we understand that the giving, it's a command, right, from God and stuff. But I want to show you, remember, because we've been learning about being a true worshiper. Being someone who worships with our heart, with all our heart, focused on Jesus, you know, expressing that and being obedient. But did you know that giving is an expression of worship? You know, I told you guys when I was growing up that I always thought worship was just the music part, right? Didn't you always, like if you grew up in church, it was like, oh, the worship part is when the band plays and it's the worship music, right? That's worship, and then everything else is the sermon, and then we give some money so the church can keep having church, you know, like that's what it is. But then I started realizing that worship is so much more than that. True worshipers, man, it's not just about Sunday and singing the songs. Man, true worshipers is about Monday through Sunday. It's about the way you live your life. Worship is a lifestyle. And matter of fact, on Sunday, it isn't just when we sing songs, but right now we're worshiping God by honoring his word. And we give as an expression of worship. Remember when we talked about expressions, lifting your hands, bowing, all that? You can look at week 2. We talked about these expressions. Well, giving, it's an expression of worship. Matter of fact, we can see it all through the Bible in the Old Testament. When you go back in the Old Testament, the Israelites, their worship services were kind of weird, but that was like 3,000 or 4,000 years ago. Their culture was completely different than ours, right? Their wealth was cattle. They had like cattle, like livestock and stuff. And they would take one and they would do some brutal stuff to it and sacrifice it, right? And that was part of their gift because it was out of their wealth that they would give it, right? And my wife would not be okay with that kind of lifestyle. I can tell you that much. Any animal lovers in the house? Sorry about that. The Old Testament was crazy. And so they gave, and that was part of their gift to God, right? Then if you keep on reading, as Jesus is being born, in Matthew chapter 2, you have the wise guys. You ever heard of the wise men coming, you know, and seeing Jesus? Look at this. It says, when they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. And the wise men were going into the house. They saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they fell down and they worshiped him. All right, but look, check this out. They worshiped him, but as an expression of that worship, it says that then opening their treasures out of their wealth, they offered Jesus gifts with gold and frankincense and myrrh. Because they were worshiping Jesus, they came to worship him, and they expressed their worship by giving Jesus gifts. It was happening all through the Bible. We see that. Matter of fact, when Jesus ascended to heaven and he came down and he sent his disciples on mission. Remember, going, like Pastor Matt just said, go into all the world, make disciples, baptize them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. You know, he ascended into heaven, really cool. And then the disciples, they had to start the early church, right? So a lot of the methods and the models that the early church did in Acts we still follow today. I want you to look at this. In Acts chapter 2, this is what their meetings look like. This is what their quote-unquote worship services look like. It says they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching. So we have sermon and fellowship, hanging out, community, the breaking of bread and prayer. So we got communion, right? We're praying for people. And it says, and all came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were being done through the apostles. And all who believed were people who were together and they had things in common. The church was in unity. They were unified. And then it says, and they were selling their possessions and belongings and distributing the proceeds to all as many as had need. Then there was giving. Giving was a part of expressing their worship in their ministry to God. You keep on going, man. You can keep on going because Paul's then going to teach the church of Corinth. Now, Paul was a cool guy. He wasn't a disciple, but he was an apostle. And he would go around. Paul was the first. You ever heard of the term multi-site churches? Where, like you have a few churches in town, matter of fact, Celebration Church that has a few different campuses. It's like, why do they do that? Well, guess what? There's no hurt on them. They're awesome. They're reaching people. Paul actually was the first multi-site church planner. He would plant a church, and then he would move on, and we'd start another church. And he would move on, and he'd start another church. And he'd move on and start another church. That's what he did. And Paul says this. This is what Paul said to the church of Corinth in 2 Corinthians 9:13. He says, by their approval of this service, they will glorify God because of your submission that comes from the confession of the gospel of Christ and the generosity of your contribution for them and for all others. You know what he's telling the church of Corinth? He says, give as an expression of worship. When you do that, I'm going to take that gift. God's going to take that gift, and he's going to impact other people. And they're going to get to hear the gospel because of your generosity. Guess what? Matt is being able to tell people about Jesus, these international students in campus ministries, because of your generosity. The same method that was 2,000 years ago that Paul used, the church still uses today. You know why? Because it makes a difference. Because you matter and you make a difference whenever you do these things. Man, Paul is telling them, man, you have a responsibility to love God, love people, and be generous. Be generous because there are people that need the love of Jesus, and sometimes the only way that can happen, some of us, guess what? We're so busy with our lives, our businesses, our work that we have to do. Some of us can't get boots on the ground on Bourbon Street talking Jesus to people all the time, right? We got kids to take care of. We got things to know. But what you can do, God's given you wealth that you can help somebody else do that. And guess what? I believe wholeheartedly, church. I really do believe this, that one day you're going to be in heaven someday. I pray this happens, that one day you're going to be at church, in heaven someday, and somebody's going to come up to you that you don't even know, and they're going to look at you and say, thank you so much for giving. Because you gave, I got to hear about Jesus and stand in heaven with you right now. I believe that so much. Man, you have an opportunity to make a difference by giving. I know, trust me, we thank you so much for your generosity here. If you weren't generous here, we couldn't keep doing what we do week in and week out. And I'm going to be honest with you guys. I'm an open book. You come up to me, I'll give you our budget. I'll show you wherever all our money goes. I'll show you the bills we have to pay. I'll show you how much we got to make each week. I'm an open book for you guys because I believe that we're together, we're working together, and we got to keep this thing going, right? We can't just survive. We got to see God do some incredible things, and we can't do that. Sometimes it's got to flow with our generosity. It's got to happen like this. But I know that if obedience is the highest form of worship, if God commands me to give, then I need to give as an expression of worship to God. I need to give him my 10%. It should flow naturally for us, just like it flowed naturally for the Samaritan in the story that Jesus was telling, right? Let's jump back to that. Jesus was talking about the Samaritan, and naturally we're going to see his compassion drive him to generosity. Generosity in maybe ways you didn't expect. Actually, I want to show you again. Pull up verse 33 in that Luke chapter 10. He says, but a Samaritan, right? He journeyed, he came to where he was. He saw this man who was beaten, who was robbed, who was stripped, and he had compassion on him. And so he starts to help him. He cleans him up. He cleans his wounds up. And then he puts him over the horse or the donkey, and he sends him into town, and he gets him a hotel room, and he starts to help him out. Man, I read this story, and I wonder how many people that are in need that we don't help because we just don't give them time. You see, if we truly love God with everything we have, then we love our neighbor. And we see our neighbor in need, we're going to help our need because our compassion drives us into action. Remember worship. And worship is a lifestyle. So I believe no matter where you are in life, man, you've got opportunities all around you to touch people with a life-transforming message of Jesus. And sometimes that best way that can happen is through your generosity, through you helping someone in need. Man, I believe that generosity begins when you find compassion. I believe that generosity begins when you find compassion, because if you look at the Samaritan that had compassion, you're going to see him be generous in 3 different ways. 3 different ways that he's generous. Matter of fact, look at verse 34 again. So the Samaritan, he's coming by, he's walking by, he sees this man in need, and it says that he went to him. So it says he had compassion, right? So this man, he has compassion on the man that he sees, and he sees him, and he goes to them, all right? I want you to catch something. You know what he just did right there? How in the world did he just give right there? He just gave this man his time. He just gave him his time. He was generous with his time, right? And it started making me think about how generosity isn't all about just giving money. A lot of times it's about giving time. How many times do we go in life and we see people in need and we're just too busy to do anything about it? Right? I mean, we have all the time where God is maybe putting it on our heart to touch this person or to help this person out, and we just keep walking like the priest or like the Levite because we're on a tight schedule. I can't do any distractions right now. I need to go, go, go. Man, the American world, you ever drove in New Orleans interstate trying to get home? I'm not talking about going to work. It seems like going to work, you just get stuck, right? And everybody's like drooping by. But man, you can see some crazy drivers trying to get home after work. Man, we got to go, go, go. We got to get home. We're such a rushing society. And I believe sometimes, man, we just got to be like the Samaritan, that somebody's in need, and if we're too busy, if we're too distracted, if we're too go, 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 we're going to miss the person that's right there that needs help. Easy way that we can give time. Matter of fact, he goes on. Look at verse 34 again. Keep that up for me. It says he went to him, so he was generous with his time, right? Now he's going to be generous another way. It says he went to him, and he bound up his wounds, and he poured oil and wine. Now this is pretty specific. So this is probably some way the Samaritan had some type of gifting to be able to heal somebody, like a nurse or something like that. So not only is he using his gift of time, but he's using talents that he has, right? Now he's using talents to help this man out. Did you know that you have a gift? Did you know that each one of you, matter of fact, 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 10, if you go read it, it says that each person has a gift. Each one of you. Each one of you have a gift that God's putting inside of you. Matter of fact, the Bible says he knew you before you were in your mother's womb. God was already forming you. And some of you walked in here and I don't have a purpose. Can I tell you, you matter and you do have a purpose? You have a purpose. You have a talent. The Samaritan, he had a talent. He was helping bind up the wounds on this person and helping them. So what talents do you have that you can be generous with and give back with? So not only is he giving his time, but he's giving his talents. And many of you have talents. You have giftings. Maybe you can't play keys or something like that. Maybe you can't preach. Could you imagine if all of us tried preaching up here? It'd be crazy. But each one of you, we have people who have different gifts all over here. There's the gift of giving, obviously, but there's people who have giftings to be able to love on children. You have people who are gifting to just be that welcome face, that encouragement, that uplifting love that they see when people come when they first come in. And there's all kind of ways that you can love and use your talents to give back. Man, I'm using my time, I'm giving my talents. And then it even goes on in verse 35. It says, the next day that this Samaritan took money and he gave it to the innkeeper, the hotel manager. He said, I need some rooms for the night. If he needs something else, get it for him. Open a tab up for me. I'm going to repay it when I get back. He gave his time, he gave his talents, and he gave out of his treasure. See, Jesus was trying to show so much more than just loving your neighbor. Jesus was trying to show that someone who loves God with all their heart, with all their mind, with all their soul, and who truly loves their neighbor and acts in love, gives them time, gives them talents, and gives them treasure. 3 simple ways that you can live a life of worship through generosity. Giving as an expression of worship. And it was compassion that started the process. You see, if you don't have compassion in your heart, then it just ends right there. You know, it has to start with that love. It has to start with, man, I love God with everything I have. If you truly love God with everything you have, then compassion it should start to flow naturally out of you. You should start to be the light for people naturally for people. Some of you are like, you know what? I hear you, Pastor, and I got to give my time, my talents, my treasure. I see that. But, you know, I work a job. I got kids. I got a busy life going on. And I don't really know ways that I can do that. You know, you're going to have to figure that out your Monday through Saturday. Because it should be a life day. Every day you can do something to, if it's given time. Man, I know we can't always give to the homeless people. Sometimes we see these homeless people on the street and we don't quite understand. You know, they might walk off with your money and go drive a Ferrari right after that. You don't know who's right or wrong, you know. But if I can't trust that, then maybe I can at least grab them by the hands and pray with them. Maybe I could give them my time, right? You see, don't try to make excuses to why you can't be generous. Because naturally, if you love God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, then naturally, you're going to give. Naturally, it's going to happen. Naturally, you're going to want to grab that guy's hands and pray with him. Naturally, those things are going to start to come out of you. That's your Monday through Saturday. But you're saying, well, I don't know how I need to find a way I can do that. I believe that's why God set up the local church. I don't think God just set up the local church for his people to come together and be these Christians that shun everybody else and keep everybody out the doors and we just do our thing. That's not Christianity. That's not who Christ called us to be. Christ called us to be a community of people that would reach other people, right? That would reach other people and keep moving his kingdom forward. So we made it practical. The method of church, you know, that happens, there are easy ways that you can get involved and you can start using your time, your talents, and your treasure. You can start using your time by showing up to church on Sunday. That's one way, because you can't make it through your week if you ain't getting some word in you, if you ain't getting some fellowship and worship together. Man, if you're just trying to go once a month or 1.5 times a month, then guess what? It's going to be tough making it. You're going to not get encouraged when you need to get encouraged for the rest of the week. So you've got to really try to keep making it. Keep that flow. Not only that, but the coolest way that you can give God your time and your talents, and so many of you do already, is joining the volunteer team, serving. Man, because we have so many different opportunities. The welcome team, the worship team, the production team, the creative team, the kids team. We have all these teams that come together to make church happen every Sunday. Every Sunday. People that are using their gifts, using their talents so that we can reach people for Jesus. And you know, when you start serving, God will start using you in such a big way, and you will start seeing your impact made. Oh my goodness. Because now you're not only just giving God your time by being there, but you're using the gift that God's put inside of you. And then naturally, you understand, hey, there might be some organizations out that you want to support. Go for it. You know, I encourage you, see an organization you want to support in this year, you go for it. But also know that all of what you support, missions and stuff like that, that's sacrificial giving. It has to first come to the storehouse, like Malachi 3:10 says. Bring the tithe into the storehouse, the church. You don't give to the church. You give to God through the local church. And then we can make an impact together. And we can bring that, just like I shared a while ago, $3,310 since January. Man, God is doing so many awesome things at our church. And it's ways that you can get plugged in. And you know why you should? Compassion. Your compassion should drive you into action. It should make you want to give your time, your talents, and your treasure. We're a team here. We're a family here. And even if it's your first time today and you're trying to look for a church home, you're trying to figure out if this might be a place, we're a year and 9 months old. We're forming a team that's going to take over this city for Jesus. I invite you to be a part of a journey that I promise you will not regret. Because God's going to do incredible things, not just through this church, but through you. So why don't you step in naturally? Compassion drive you into action and see what God will do in and through your life. Man, it could be life-changing. Matter of fact, the last thing I'm going to show you guys today, you don't have to tie them a little, is me and my wife, every week, we give our tithe to our church. This is our church. We give our tithe to our church. But I want to show you that. I don't want to show you all the pastor gives. That's not what I'm trying to show you, okay? So let's take that off the table. What I want to show you is that many people, when we give, it's just throw it in the bucket. It's what I'm supposed to do. It's what I'm supposed to do. Or text it. Remember, we have text to give. Text it. I'm going to text or press send. That's what I'm supposed to do. That's what I'm supposed to do. Your bucket comes by, I throw in the money. That's what I'm supposed to do. I'm commanded to do that. It's obedient. You see, when we do it out of obligation, we take the worship out of it. Giving is an expression of worship. A lot of times when I use text to give at our church, I love the text to give. And a lot of times before I text to give, I will sit there and I'll pray. God, use this. Use this to touch your kingdom. Use this, God, to impact somebody's life. Because I pray that one day when I get to heaven, I'm going to get a few people that come up to me and say, thank you so much for your generosity. Because you gave, I got to go to heaven and be impacted by you. So I encourage you that when you give, don't just do this. Don't do that. Pray over it. Say with me. Pray over it. God, use this to touch your kingdom. Use this to reach somebody with the life-transforming message of Jesus. You see, I hate it when we're taught and when we're told, oh, you got to give so it'll bless your life. Man, that's such a selfish way of thinking. I don't want to give because it's going to bless me. It's better to bless than to receive. So I want to pray in a way. Guess what? The cool thing about God is in Philippians chapter 4, verse 19, he says that my God will supply every need according to his riches and glory, right? So if you're giving, God's going to take care of you. But I don't want that to be about that. I want to say, God, use this to impact your kingdom. Use this to touch somebody with the life-transforming message of Jesus. And then I want to give as an expression of worship. So with everybody on your feet, you can go ahead and stand on your feet. We're going to get ready to close. But some of you need to respond.